I think I'm up here first by default because I think Jen ran an errand somewhere. So. My name is Dean Pollpeter. As a forensic scientist, I get a chance to talk to people about sexual assault and rape quite a bit. And I'm always surprised and appalled at the rape myths that are still very prevalent in our society today. I hear things like, we live in a small town, that'll never happen here. Or, we're Christians, we're active in our church, that won't happen to us. And I've also heard on more than one occasion, my kids are smart, this will never happen to them. When I was in high school, I remember learning a little bit about rape. I remember learning that rape was something that happened to bad girls dressed provocatively, i.e. slutty, who were doing bad things like drinking and drugs and partying. I remember learning that you weren't supposed to walk in a dark alley because someone might be hiding in the bushes and the monster would jump out and get you and try to rape you. I remember learning not to walk through parking lots unless you had your keys in between your fingers to ward off the attack of some random person that might rape you. And you know what? Rape happens in all of those situations, but that's not the most common situation. And I even remember hearing a little bit about child sex abusers, you know, the creepy old men who abuse young girls. But again, that's still not one of the most common situations. But I believe that that's what rape was. I believe that that's when rape happened. Until I was about 16. I was a junior in high school. It was the fall of my junior year. And my boyfriend had broken up with me the year before. And like all first loves, it crushed my heart. But by my junior year, I had started to heal, started to put the pieces back together, miraculously figured out there was life without him. And then I became the victim of some harassment and bullying, very severe harassment and bullying by students, teachers, and administrators at my high school. Out of the blue, my ex-boyfriend called me. He went to a different high school. He said, I've heard what's happening. I'm really sorry. I miss our friendship and I really want us to be friends. I needed a friend at that moment in time, like a lifeline. And I was thrilled to have somebody that I could trust. So eventually our schedules worked out and I was able to go over to his house. But I told him on the phone before I went over and when I got to his house, I said, I just want a friendship. I don't want anything physical. I don't want to have sex with you. And he said that was fine, that was okay. All he wanted was a friendship too. But when I went to his house that night, my trusted friend who I had turned to for support raped me. Like a majority of victims, I didn't do anything that you're supposed to do when you're raped. I didn't tell the police. I didn't go to the hospital. In fact, I didn't tell really anyone at all right away. Because I didn't meet that stereotype of rape. I wasn't dressed provocatively. I was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. I wasn't a party girl. I didn't drink. I was a straight A student, essentially a very good kid who followed all the rules, including my parents' very strict rule that I was never to be at a guy's house when his parents weren't home. His mom was sitting at the kitchen table grading papers while I was raped in her basement, and she had no idea. And this guy wasn't the monster in the bushes. He wasn't some sleazy guy drugging a drink or a creepy old man. He was my best friend for several years, and I had known him for several years. His mom, as I said, was a school teacher. His dad was a minister. I should have been safe with him. I lost my train of thought there for a second. But so then, when I finally, basically because of all of this, I felt like I must have done something wrong. I did something that made me deserve this. I was to blame, and it was all my fault. Unfortunately, when I told a few of my friends or was able to describe to them what happened that night a few days later, they each confirmed that blame, guilt, and shame that I already felt. They asked me questions like, what were you wearing? What did you do to lead him on? Do you feel guilty for cheating on the guy that you just started to date? Keep in mind, they had these same stereotypical images of what rape was taught to them. But I left those conversations wondering how laying on the floor with my hands held down above my head and crying and saying no was somehow leading this guy on. Because of their reactions, I decided that the best thing to do was to pretend like this had never happened, because that would make it all go away. And amazingly, that worked for about a year. By then I was in college and I had started dating someone. But I realized that I needed to tell him what I had experienced, because as hard as I was trying to not let this ever affect me, it was going to affect my relationships. Quite honestly, when I finally got the courage to tell him what I had been through and what I had experienced, I expected him to run off in the other direction as fast as he could. But when I told him, he sat silent for what was probably a couple of seconds. To me, it seemed like an eternity. And then he turned to me and he said, "I never thought I'd know the one." I don't know what I was expecting him to say, but that wasn't it. And so I looked at him and said, "What? What do you mean?" And he said, "I've always been told that 1 in 4 women is raped. I just never thought I'd know the one." He was the first person to describe this experience as the crime that it was, rape. I certainly never thought that I would be the one. And you know what? If those myths that I talked about when I first started talking were true, I wouldn't have been the one. If those myths were true, 70 to 80% of victims in Iowa would not know their attackers. Those myths aren't true. And it takes groups like us and people like the people who are going to speak and anyone else who has a story to share that they can share, sharing their stories to teach society that those rapes aren't true. Because the real truth about rape is that people living in small towns and very large cities get raped, and it's not their fault. People who are of the Christian faith or any other religious denomination that they choose to believe in get raped, and it's not their fault. Smart people get raped, and it's not their fault. And note I use the term people because it's not just girls that get raped. 1 in 6 men will experience rape, and it's not their fault. And there are people who dare to go out to a bar and have a few or a whole lot of drinks with their friends, some of them wearing short skirts and high heels while they do it, who get raped, and it is still not their fault. Rape is never the victim's fault. Rape is always the fault of the rapist, the person who takes that choice away from their victim. I really want to thank all of you wonderful people who have come out here today and supported victims and just supported sexual assault awareness in general. Don't stop teaching, don't stop speaking. Do whatever you can to teach society the real truths about rape. Thanks.